What would be the punishment for something like this as a deterrent? Is death on the table here?
They don't want you to know that.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Monster Consortium. My name is Sean Prober, and I am once again joined by George McMillan, and we are going to be covering the recent leaking of Pentagon documents. Now, we've seen similar circuses before. When Eric Snowden revealed to the world that the American Bill of Rights was dead, the media presented him as the villain. When Julian Assange and Bradley Manning revealed America's nefarious foreign policy and murder of even American citizens overseas, they were the villains in that story. Now, when Jack Teixeira reveals that we have been lied to about America's involvement in Ukraine, we shouldn't be surprised that he's painted as the villain in this story. Now, it would be it would be false to say that what he did was purely heroic, when there are negative consequences to these kind of scenarios. Now, when we have Teixeira leaking these documents, what they do is, unfortunately, they do tell China, they do tell Russia exactly where their holes are, what kind of moles are there, how this information can be getting out. And they could shore up their defenses, and that's a major knock to our intelligence community. Now, when we talk about troops that are actually on the ground, it's very fair to say that what Teixeira did here is putting lives in danger. The same couldn't have been said about Snowden or about Assange for the bulk of what their claims were. Now, something that is funny about this situation and how quickly they found him, there are about 1.3 million people that could have had access to this type of information. It's a large number, and they got him in a week. Now, when we talk about the leaking of that Dobbs decision in the Supreme Court, it's been about a year at this point, and we have not heard about a single lead, not a single one. And there are about 12 to 24 suspects that could have had access to that information. So I'm sure it's going to be coming any day. But now, unlike these previous leakers, there's a lot of oddness in this case. Well, the media refuses to ask the question, we have to wonder how this 21-year-old had access to so many internal CIA documents. According to Larry Johnson, a veteran of the CIA and State Department's Office of Counterintelligence, it's not normal, it's not typical, it's not easy, particularly for a member of the National Guard to gain this level of clearance. I've had some friends on the National Guard, and I don't even know if they knew what day of the week it was most of the time. So let's jump into one of our videos by ABC News, and they'll give a little bit more information about who this young man was and is. He hasn't been killed yet.
Teixeira comes from a family with strong military ties. His mother volunteered with a veterans group. His stepfather retired after a 34-year career with the same unit Teixeira served, the 102nd Intelligence Wing at Joint Base Cape Cod. His senior year quote in his high school yearbook, "Actions speak louder than words." Online, Teixeira allegedly leading a group of about 24, mostly young men and teen boys, on the discussion forum Discord. Members of the group tell the Washington Post Teixeira was known as OG. He boasted of access to classified material, they said, and posted the secrets for them to see.
He was a very smart man. There's no way in any world that he would not know that he knew that these were illegal.
Someone spread those posts far beyond the small chat group, and they made their way around the world. Teixeira held a top-secret security clearance. Federal prosecutors said he improperly and unlawfully retained and transmitted national defense information to people not authorized to receive it, causing serious damage to the national security of the United States.
All right, now George, you're somewhat of an expert on intelligence and clearances. how odd is it that somebody in with this status would be able to get all of this information that he obtained?
Uh, I mean, I'm not an expert. I just, um,
Play one on TV.
yeah, yeah, I just play it on TV. I don't claim to be an expert. I'm not, retired in that area, but or anything like that.
No.
But yeah, apparently, from what I've seen, the issues are that they're photographs of the documents. So somebody had to have had the printouts of the documents, and somebody else had to post them, and then he somehow got them. From what I understand, while the Air Force would be investigating that would be their area, and the Pentagon CID would be investigating where they might have come from. So there'd be several different investigative law enforcement agencies within DoD that would be investigating how many printouts there were of that document, and then who they were presented to, and who might have taken pictures from them of them, and then how would they get disseminated past that. Emails, because the top secret classified network, it's an intranet, it's not an internet, so it's not connected to the regular internet. You can't just accidentally forward emails, that's impossible. The way that classified information is usually leaked, usually somebody has to hit the print button and physically take the documents out or take a picture of them. You're not supposed to have cell phones, anything with a camera or recording devices anywhere near a SCIF, secret compartment information facility. So somebody had to violate a series of rules. Now, he wouldn't be privy to the printouts in Massachusetts if there were presentations that were supposed to be given to the generals in the Pentagon or whoever in the Pentagon. So somehow he did get a hold of these photocopies, from what I understand.
So what's clear is that this isn't a lone gunman kind of situation, that there must have been some other people involved in this leak other than just this man.
From what I understand at this time, yes.
Now, I have seen already that the media has been reporting that Teixeira was described as a right-winger, an anti-Semite, a racist, a gun lover, and a religious extremist. If they had a picture of him in a MAGA hat, I think they would be all set with the image that they're trying to present him with. But whether or not that's fully accurate is kind of beyond us at this moment. Now, why don't we jump into some of the specifics of what actually got leaked, what kind of information has been shown, and what exactly are the implications of these things?
Yeah. Okay.
New information tonight about the Chinese spy balloon shot down earlier this year. The details coming from the classified documents allegedly leaked by 21-year-old National Guard airman Jack Teixeira, arrested by federal authorities this week. The Washington Post, citing documents not seen by NBC News, reports that Chinese spy balloon carried sensors and antennas the U.S. still had not identified more than a week after shooting it down, and that the U.S. knew of up to 4 additional Chinese spy balloons.
Now, when I hear that certainly tells me that the decision to allow that spy balloon to continue its journey all the way until it arrived to the other coast had to have been the wrong move there. I think the idea that it would damage property to such an extent that it would be necessary to let it go all the way and finish the mission sounds a bit far, and certainly that only adds to the embarrassment of that situation. What do you think about that, George?
I mean, any weather balloon or spy balloon, it's information collecting, so it's going to have electronic devices on it. So then the question becomes, what would it do? What would it do that that regular satellite intelligence wouldn't also do? And I wouldn't really be too sure if much of anything. It's kind of it's really low on the issue as far as its threat to the United States, as far as that goes. There's a lot of ways to send airborne ISR equipment across the United States. The balloon is almost like a troll, just to send it across and just see how the United States reacts. Apparently, several balloons went over during the Trump administration, but they didn't raise the alarm there. They seemed to raise the alarm when this balloon went across, because there was several other domestic issues, going on at the time. So, I mean, as far as that issue, it seems like it's supposed to take some of the other issues like inflation and things like that off the table and replace it with, look at the balloon. As far as the other leaks go, you're talking about just a few different issues as far as troop movements, and we're going to later on get into a video with other China intelligence, ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance equipment, and then what's embarrassing the United States. So yeah, just go ahead and go on with the videos. We'll discuss it.
Yes, yeah. So speaking of that, our next one, it actually deals with what's going on in Taiwan and exactly the threat that they're facing right now from China.
The paper also reporting on Taiwan's vulnerability to a Chinese attack, citing a Pentagon assessment that China would quickly gain air superiority if it invaded Taiwan. U.S. Secretary of State Blinken today addressed fallout from the leaked documents.
We have engaged with our allies and partners since these leaks came out, and we have done so at high levels, and we have made clear our commitment to safeguarding intelligence and our commitment to our security partnerships.
Now, that shouldn't be too much of a surprise to think that they would have the upper hand there. Obviously, we've talked quite a bit in previous videos about what's going on in China, specifically the South China Sea, and their attempt to battle the United States for influence in that area, in Taiwan and in the Philippines. So this is just, I think, to me, another sign that we are heading in that direction where Taiwan or the Philippines could very well be a Ukraine-like state in regards to fighting our geopolitical rivals in the immediate future. Do you think that's fair to say, George?
Yeah, I wanted to focus on, the information itself is not new. Yeah. The idea that China can overwhelm Taiwan's air defenses is just, it's widely debated in a whole bunch of different defense blogs. You can click on YouTube and watch things like Binkoff's Battles, and where they do a net assessment comparison of this country versus that country. I watch those things all the time. So in substance, there's no information that's new. It's just that the United States acknowledging that is very bad to put out there. That should be left for other open source experts to conjecture, but not something for this individual to feel free to put out in the open source by himself in open media.
That is one of the drawbacks to these type of things. I feel like for the American citizen, you're kind of between a rock and a hard place, because obviously we want our intelligence community to work at their best, and we want troops on the ground to be safe, and we want these kind of secrets kept behind closed doors. But there's so much inaccuracy coming from the media that often I feel like the leaks are the truest things that we end up seeing. So it's kind of a lose-lose scenario for most of these. Now, because of that, we're hearing a lot of attention and a lot of people who are looking look into this top secret clearance and make dramatic changes to that to prevent something like this from ever occurring again. So let's dive into that video real quick.
There are also new insights tonight into why the U.S. government didn't know for months that state secrets had been posted online. At issue, the limits on what kind of checks are done on the 1.3 million Americans with top secret security clearance.
Right now, there is not a social media evaluation done. There's not an appetite for that. But what they do online is not evaluated by any agency as part of their security clearance.
Former Counter-Intel Chief Bill Evanina says he pushed for more social media monitoring, but privacy concerns won out. Critics say the government now can't keep track of all the people with access to sensitive information.
That does not seem like a situation that's optimal there. Do you think, George, that other countries have a similar issue with their intelligence, or is this kind of specific to the United States because we try to balance the freedoms on the internet a bit more than other places? Does that make us more vulnerable to threats like this?
Yes. I mean, other countries don't have, say China. I mean, they don't have a, they don't have a First Amendment and they don't have a Fourth Amendment, so they can spy on their citizens all they want if they wanted to. And of course, whenever you have information like that, there's a tendency for a regime to use it politically and target their political enemies when it has nothing to do with national security itself. It has more to do with politics than that. So yeah, that's all. That'd be the concern here. You're interfering with people's privacy rights, but yeah, you could also open up people for political targeting, depending on how it's used, because that's been an issue of like Lois Lerner being one of them. So yeah, I mean, there's always been
very political.
Yeah, there's always going to be a privacy issue, but yeah, that'd be a tough one, because if you start monitoring every electronic device of everyone that has a security clearance, you might get a lot fewer job applicants, for those kinds of jobs. So you might not end up with the best people, because people aren't going to want their lives that closely surveilled of what they say to their wives, their lawyers, or their priests, or their psychologists, or whoever.
All their social media accounts, their email accounts. Yeah.
You'd be monitoring all electronic devices and everything that they type on a keyboard or on a phone. So yeah, there would be some serious privacy concerns there.
Now, before we jump into the next set of videos, now what would we consider? What would be the punishment for something like this as a deterrent? Is death on the table here for this batch of information leaked?
Oh, yeah. Whenever you start talking about troop movements, yeah, that could be considered treasonous, from what I understand. Of course, that would be highly unlikely, but in the videos coming up, he does talk about special forces troops inside Ukraine for US, UK, and I think it was Latvia. So yeah, talking about active duty troops on the ground, that could be considered treasonous.
Should we expect a gender change this time around?
Like Chelsea Manning.
Yeah, is that going to be the new?
I somehow doubt that in this particular case.
All right, we'll keep an eye out for that. So, as George was saying, there are other information about troop movements that we'll get into later in these videos. But let's dive into one of the videos that just shows exactly what China's capabilities are right now, and a little bit more information behind closed doors information about China.
We have looked across media reports to try and figure out exactly what information Airman Teixiera revealed. When you look at the list, I am sure you will agree that Airman Jack Teixeira has not done his country any favors. Among the revelations, the U.S. believes that UN Secretary General is too willing to accommodate Russian interests, when it comes to brokering Russian cooperation and allowing food grain deals to other countries. 3 documents based on intelligence detail discussions among senior Jordanian officials over whether or not to shut out the Chinese firm Huawei out of its 5G rollout plan.
Yeah, so a lot going on there, as far as Russia, as far as China. It seems like we're trying to allow certain food exports just to make sure that there's not a famine or something like that, and that's getting some pushback internally. What would you say is the takeaway from that, George?
Oh, the issue there would be more U.S. officials being embarrassed about their private internal conversations being disclosed like that, as far as not liking the certain UN policies. The UN, on the other hand, the UN World Food Program, if it's got people to feed, which they do, and they have a source of food, they're going to use it despite UN sanctions. It's just a disclosure that is embarrassing for the certain U.S. officials to be, kind of exposed, bad mouthing the UN General Secretary.
Well,
So
I guess to be
it's more
fair,
embarrassment rather than a national security issue.
well, as we've gone through, the UN Secretary General has often, throughout the many people to hold that title, had many criticisms of America publicly as well. So I won't feel too bad about it. Now, when one of the major things that came out is actually and perhaps the scariest, is the cyber attack capabilities of China and what they could be doing. So let's take a look at that one.
Another document marked top secret addresses China's developing cyber attack capabilities. It says these are designed to, quote, deny, exploit, and hijack satellite links and networks as part of its strategy to control information, which it considers to be a key part of its warfighting domain. Several other documents suggest Russian officials are at loggerheads over the reporting of casualties in the war in Ukraine. The main intelligence agency, the Federal Security Bureau, FSB, has accused the country's defense ministry of playing down the human impact of the war. These revelations show the extent to which intelligence agencies have penetrated the Russian intelligence and military.
Oh, so with as far as the cyber attack capabilities, would you say that is more directed on China controlling its own population, or being able to actually influence foreign countries and what's going on there?
Oh, it was my impression that they were talking about satellite warfare. In that context, Reagan started that with the Strategic Defense Initiative, the Star Wars program, as far as getting satellite domination in space, and then also the ability to knock out other countries' satellites. Ever since then, Russia and China have been playing catch up in that area, and well, the Trump administration started the Space Force, just to focus on that one area. It would be interesting to see what's in these because I haven't read. I'm not going to either, but it would be interesting to know what specifics it was, because then that might tell the Chinese how the U.S. obtained the information, and then they'll take countermeasures to stop that information, which means then we can't use those sources and methods anymore. So yeah, it's bad to post stuff like that, and he's in trouble.
Did you happen to catch the recent article about China allowing AI to control a satellite for a day?
No.
Yeah, and it what it targeted, what it looked at, it was actually pretty interesting. It seemed like it had a lot of military interest. It was focused on areas that would be key, but they don't know whether or not it was random or what was going on there. But yeah, just an interesting aside. And then as far as the death count goes, about how many people are actually dying over there. I guess that's pretty standard in war efforts, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. Okay. Before I start talking about the three different issues that we have here that are actually hurt the United States national security, and one of them was special forces troop movements, and then the second one was sources and methods about obtaining China's ISR capabilities, and the third issue was what's embarrassing the United States. So now we're on to the third issue. The United States has been claiming that the Ukrainian army has been fighting like lions, and they've been pushing back Russia, and the war is in a stalemate, and Ukraine is winning, and then it's in a stalemate. What this reveals is that the United States has known all along that there's a 7-to-1 ratio, well, 76-16, about a 7-to-1 ratio, as far as Ukrainians dying to Russians dying. So
Wow.
that, instead of Ukrainians army fighting like lions and having and holding the Russians at bay, in this case, yeah, the Russians are really winning handily. And that's the issue that's been embarrassing to the United States. And if we can bring up the East-West divide, because there's a number of issues as to why that's embarrassing. Because if you start to look at Secretary of Defense Austin and General Milley have been testifying in Congress that Ukrainians are winning the war. Yes. And that's been the popular Western narrative. So this counters that narrative. The second issue is that the nature of the war has been mischaracterized. The mainstream media has been saying that Russia's going to try to take all of Ukraine. They're trying to take Kiev, and then they want to take Western Ukraine, and then they're going to take Transnistria and Moldova next, and then they're going to try to take the Baltic states and Poland after that. And it's just they're after the Polish plains north of the Carpathians, and they're going to try to fill the Bessarabian Gap just south of the Carpathians and between the Carpathian Mountains and the Black Sea in Romania. And I never believed that to be true. I really thought that Russia, I'm on record before the war started as saying that Russia's main interest is always been just to secure the Russian-speaking areas. And here we have a map. See, the map on the right is a 2001 national consensus map, where the darker brown areas are the pro-Russian areas, and the map on the left is a 2010 consensus of the Tymoshenko and Yanukovych election, where the dark blue areas are the ones that heavily favored Yanukovych and who was pro-Russian. So the agreement that they wanted was to have more autonomy for the Russian-speaking areas separate from the Ukrainian-speaking areas. So on this map, on the map on the left, the reddish and dark brown areas are basically the Catholic Ukrainian areas, and the map on the right showing are the east of the Dnieper. Map on the left, I mean, but on the right side of that map, meaning east of the Dnieper River, is where the Russian Orthodox areas have traditionally been. And this goes back to the Catholic Ukraine or Catholic Orthodox divide in what was that, 1063, I believe. So I always thought that Russia had limited objectives of just to secure the Orthodox areas, get the water turned back on for Crimea. They had to protect Crimea because it's their only warm water port. That's where their Black Sea fleet is. Russia only has one north-south flowing river that's warm water and reaches the Black Sea that can get out to the major oceans, and that's the Don River. The second south flowing river would be the Volga River that flows into the Caspian. They're connected by a canal at Volgograd, so they can all shift its agriculture and mineral exports out through Rostov-on-Don, which comes out in Azov Sea, which is protected by Crimea. So there is no country on earth that has so much natural resources as Russia, and it only basically has one major export point at Rostov-on-Don. So the United States geostrategically has wanted to control that area. I've done other videos where we go through the Wolfowitz Doctrine, the Rand reports, Brzezinski's Grand Chessboard, Speakman's theory, and even going back as to other grand strategies. And they've always had an interest. The U.S. and UK, the Anglosphere, has always had an interest in holding on Crimea as a choke point, whether it be the Russian Empire, the Soviet Union, or the Russian Federation today. So that hasn't changed. So Russia's main interest has always been just to control what's vital. So I always put that out as distinct because it's always also been put out in the different military blogs, newspapers, that if Russia did invade into NATO-controlled territory, they would definitely try to fight a guerrilla counterinsurgency warfare against it. So since that's been public for, a bunch of people have been writing about that for over 10 years now. So if the Russians already know that, because they can read too, then you would have a stronger argument that they would want to stay out of a guerrilla warfare and just stay in their Russian-speaking areas and just control their vital interests, which would just be the Donbass and the Crimea, Rostov-on-Don region. So that being said, instead of taking a territorial expansion mission, Russia has really been just using what's in its most vital strategic interest, which is just the east of Ukraine. And they've been just fighting a defensive battle and a cauldron strategy. And it's been actually Kiev that's been trying to push them back and retake the Crimea, which has always been, it's always been Russian Tatar since Catherine the Great.
Yeah, I believe in the early 90s, there was a referendum, 90+% wanted to be in Russia. When it was done again more recently, it was very similar to that. So the idea that with the tough talk that we've been hearing in our media about just how bad Russia has been doing, the idea that they would also give up Crimea, that Crimea would be necessary for peace moving forward, shows that they're not serious discussions when we're talking about trying to solve this conflict. And to your point, to control these urban areas, the idea that they would, for a long period of time, control Kiev, it's kind of fantasy. And I don't think that Russia's really looking at it as a possibility. Now, one of the leaks that we also heard was about the Ukraine air defense, and just as another point of how poor Ukraine is doing right now, they're expected to run out of munitions for a lot of their air defense systems in the next few months. So this narrative that Russia is going to have to give up all of this, and Russia's going to be how can they continue is largely shown to be false by these leaks. and that certainly changes the perspective for many Americans about this issue. Now, America, in addition to the success of Russia in this, hasn't exactly been honest about what our troops are doing. So now we've pointed out the negatives of discussing special forces and troops on the ground, but this hasn't been discussed much or at all. So let's dive into the last video we have about exactly what's going on the ground in terms of special forces that we were not aware of.
Yeah, I wanted to close out that one last point because the mischaracterization of the type of war that Russia was waging has led to the mischaracterization of the casualty report of being 7-1 in favor of the Russians, since they've been just setting up a defensive battle and using artillery. The Ukrainians keep on sending their people into the fields of fire. The Russians, if they think that they've given up territory before to take a better defensive position, so they can save their people for combat and attrit the Ukrainians to a much higher level. And I've talked to some people that have gone over as individual volunteers, and yeah, they've confirmed that that the Ukrainians are sending people forward, and they are just getting demolished by the Russian artillery. As far as the Ukrainian air defenses go, see, nowadays with cheap drones, you can antagonize another country's SAM sites and then have them shoot down cheap drones to the point that they run out of air defense missiles. And then later on, then you're free to come in with your real aircraft and then bomb away, freely. So yeah, nowadays it's with drone technology, it's going to be way easier to make a country use up its air defenses shooting down drones, and then bring in your heavy bombers or your fighter attack aircraft later on. And I think that's what we're saying. Russia has not used its air force as much as possible, but it's been keeps on firing other assets into Ukraine, so they'll use up their air defense system. So now it's going to be we'll see what the West is going to do as far as how they're going to keep up with this flow of missiles to the Ukraine to keep them in the fight.
Well, I'm sure our weapons industry has some good ideas for that. The chief lobbyist of NATO expansion since the 90s has been our weapon manufacturers. And when you hear about situations like this, when they're just blowing away their explosions on cheap drones, you could understand exactly why when you hear about these stories about upgrading air forces in Finland, and we've joked about the trade-off where all the countries have traded their old fighter jets for these new up-to-date ones. It certainly makes sense why that lobbying effort is in place. So yeah, let's just dive into our last video about the special forces and what's going on over there.
Another document, dated March 23rd, 2023, refers to the presence of a small number of Western special forces operating inside Ukraine. The UK has the largest contingent, 50 members, followed by Latvia with 17, France with 15, the US with 14, and the Netherlands with 1. Yet another document from early February expresses misgivings about Ukraine's chances of success in its forthcoming counteroffensive, saying that problems with generating and sustaining sufficient forces could result in only moderate territorial gains by Ukraine.
So it does seem so distant from what we've been hearing that it's a bit jarring, right? For this.
Yeah, as far as the idea that there's active duty special forces in a war zone, by either side. I mean, the United States has been doing that since Vietnam.
Mhm.
Yeah, I just came back from my Ho Chi Minh tour trail in Thailand, Lao, and Cambodia and Laos. So I mean, that's always been going on. So that's going to be no surprise to the Russians. But in that document, its confirmation was very specific numbers, which is bad because the Russians aren't supposed to have an actual specific numbers of active duty troops. Now, like I said before, there's numerous retired or prior NATO force militaries in Ukraine. I think that's widely known. There's been a number of YouTube videos on there where people have come back from Ukraine and discussed what goes on over there. So some of this is known, and the Russians are, of course, aware of this because they're monitoring communications, as well as everybody else. But yeah, to list an actual specific number of active duty troops is that's definitely treasonous.
I'm sure that one guy from the Netherlands is probably pretty alarmed by that. Now, one of the most embarrassing things that I saw that came out of this was we expect people to spy on our geopolitical rivals, but it was also shown that South Korea, we're currently spying on South Korea to ensure and to look into whether or not they're going to help out with Ukraine. So I think it shows the desperation of America right now, that we're even spying on our close allies to make sure that they're doing what they're promising as far as supporting this war effort that seems futile at this point.
Yeah, the United States. Okay, they were caught spying on Angela Merkel during the Obama
Yeah.
So so that goes on. Everybody knows the United States does it. Everybody knows that they've used Denmark and Norway to do a lot of that. In this case, and okay, we didn't get into my 8 power center strategy. I think Tim covered it in the last a few weeks ago, but we need to get into that in more detail when we have time. But as the sanctions wear on, especially next winter, when there's when fuel prices are likely to hike, and Germany is going to run out of its underground supply of cheap Russian natural gas, prices are going to go. Now, in the Far East, Russia has a whole bunch of oil and natural gas fields. Power Siberia 1 is already linked to Beijing and Shanghai, and they're expanding that network. They're expanding it. They're expanding the net. They're putting more oil and gas fields in the Far East connected to that. They're also expanding the actual pipeline network itself inside China. So you have that going on. And you also have Japan can get cut off, is highly vulnerable to getting cut off of oil supplies from the Middle East and Indonesia, Malaysia, and Borneo. So you get the situation where if there's conflict over Taiwan, would South Korea and Japan switch sides and start paying for oil and natural gas in rubles to Russia to save their industries? Because if they don't save their industries and their economy collapses, they can't import food and other things, then you're talking about tens of millions of people starving.
Yeah, they're a major loser in this conflict. What was the tunnel pipeline that they were going to
Hokkaido
build?
to Sakhalin.
Yeah. I mean, that would have been a major game changer for the global auto market if something like that had been successful.
So the present government in Japan has always been, they want the Koreans back. They would love to have Sakhalin Island. So some of the hardliners in charge now, and they've always been anti-Chinese, of course, because they took over Manchuria. And the Chinese are very anti-Japanese because there's a lot of anti-Japanese, as Michael Yan's been reporting, a lot of anti-Japanese history taught in China and in the museum. So they're trying to stoke up the anger and the disgust towards Japan. So they've been edging their society towards that. Now the question is, whether it be in Germany or Japan, once the economy starts to collapse because fuel prices get too high, does a new government come into power because they're voted in by democracy, right? We believe in democracy, right? So would a new government perhaps come in and sign a deal with Russia for oil and natural gas? Because if you're cut off from oil, you can't really ship natural gas, but LNG is too expensive. If you're cut off from oil supplies coming through the South China Sea, Straits of Malacca, Strait of Hormuz, would the Japanese would have a cheap source right across the bay in Vladivostok for oil, and they just build the railway and pipeline tunnel from Hokkaido to Sakhalin Island. You also have to say the same thing of Korea. Would they switch sides because they would just need the ships to come around from Vladivostok, drop off the oil at a cheap price because Russia would sell it at a cheap price in order to get them to flip? They would definitely sell at a discount because that would be a huge diplomacy battle for them. So that would be the concern of the United States to monitor different interest groups inside Japan or South Korea to see who's talking about, potentially switching sides. So I'm guessing it has something to do with that. Again, that's above his pay grade to make those decisions. So we're not for leaking classified documents, but it also is embarrassing to the United States.
Yeah, I believe to your point about the new administration, there was the new administration in South Korea that has been a little bit more resistant to go gung ho in order to maintain this cohesion in Ukraine. And you can imagine when you're thinking about all those profits, the idea that you're going to jeopardize all of that just to keep people who don't even want to be part of Ukraine in Ukraine for the global interests of, I guess, the United States. It's a tough conundrum that we face here. So I think that that provides a little bit more information about these leaks. I want to urge everybody to like, subscribe, and share these videos to everyone you can. And George, do you have anything else to say?
Now, other than the fact that, I wanted to throw that map in there.
Because it is very telling.
Because people the mainstream media doesn't discuss it, and there's a whole bunch of maps like that on if you just go to Google Images, so people can see exactly which areas that Russia is interested in, and no, they're probably not interested in going to Kiev or to Lvov, because then they'd get pinned down in the guerrilla warfare trying to hold that area.
Forever.
A lot of people conjecture that they would go to Lvov and knock down the Stefan Bandera statue, but I don't know. Would you risk 10,000 people to do that? 20 or 30,000 people to do that? Probably not. If they just stay in
the amount of time that they would have to be there, you'd imagine that it would be steady losses for many, many years.
Yeah, and then going from a 7-to-1 KIA ratio that's in their favor, it would probably then go 7-to-1 the other way.
Yeah.
So I don't think that they have any interest in going west of the Dnieper River. It's just my personal opinion, of course.
So with 701, that does not sound sustainable. So just to end things, where do you see that this kind of partitioning could be a likely scenario now? Could we be seeing a redrawing of Ukraine's borders? And would that end the conflict?
Oh, I put it in my other videos. The problem is, the people that have been pushing for the eastward expansion of NATO are now, they just don't have an off ramp. They don't have an exit strategy. The other thing is since that 2014 Maidan Revolution has U.S. fingerprints all over it. I think I can say that.
I think that's fair.
And the EU association agreement is different than the one that they discussed verbally with Yanukovych. The question then becomes, if Russia doesn't trust the United States, because the United States wasn't supposed to expand NATO eastward, and they did, and they kept on expanding NATO eastward despite their expansion, despite Putin's objections. Well, then who would the Russians trust to do that negotiation? They're certainly not going to trust anybody in the Biden administration. They're certainly not going to trust anybody that was involved in the Bush 43 administration. So it would have to be a different set of actors, or maybe a different administration with a whole different set of people. So it would be nice to end the war, but I don't see it. I don't see how negotiations would be possible under this current administration, under the Biden administration and the Putin administration in Russia. Just because who's trustworthy on either side? Is too much of a divide.
I recall a video where Zelensky and Trump actually, and Zelensky was talking about needing more money and more American support, and Trump looked at him and said, I think you and Putin need to come with the deal. I think you and Putin need to just come up with something with something on your end, rather than all this.
Yeah, Trump's a businessman. I'm sure he was told that of the importance of the Rostov-on-Don port to the Russian economy. In the other videos I do, I go over the pipeline maps in detail where they are. I'm sure somebody would have briefed them on that. I mean, the maps are on Google. It's not hard to get. And showed them the importance of why taking Poland, Ukraine, and Georgia as a match set would imperil the Russian economy, because you're taking all their pipeline and ports entrances into Europe. So Trump was definitely for a deal, because he knows that the Russians can't give up that territory.
I guess it would be almost equivalent to Russia or China taking control over the Panama Canal and not expecting any negative reactions coming from the United States.
Yeah, it's difficult to make a comparison, because the United States has a whole west coast of Pacific ports, a whole east coast of
absolutely
of Atlantic ports, and a whole Gulf of Mexico series of ports. So we have ports that we can export all over the place. So Russia's in the opposite situation, because Vladivostok is surrounded by the Japanese island chain. Sea of Okhotsk freezes over and is still surrounded by the Kurils, which is why the Russians are never going to give up the Kurils, because it's only the southern Kurils that don't freeze over, the ones that go right next to Japan. All the other ones freeze over for several months out of the year. The Baltic freezes over and is hemmed in by NATO navies, so that doesn't work. The Arctic strategy of Russia, it still freezes over. You still can't move through it like you can in a warm water area. It's still expensive. Yes, they have tons of They have tons of oil and natural gas, just like the United States and Canada has up by Prudhoe Bay. They have the same thing over there. But everything kind of comes down to the pipelines going into into Europe through Poland and Ukraine and Georgia, and the importance of the Rostov-on-Don port.
All right. Well, yeah, we'll wrap it up there. Like we were saying, definitely like, subscribe, comment to this. You're not going to get that kind of depth into geopolitical strategies anywhere else. I think we're the only people in the world talking about it, George. So we'll keep things going, and take care, everyone. Good luck.